anyway.
But postmarked?
Yes, postmarked on Election Day. Yes, absolutely. But Perry, I don't have to say this to you and your audience. None of us trust the Supreme Court, obviously.
Right.
So it may or may not be done right. I know Justice Roberts, as conservative as he is, my feel is he does not want to be known as the Roberts Court that took away an election. Mm-hmm. He's an institutionalist. As conservative as he is, he doesn't like to be controversial. He doesn't have to be. But he doesn't have a choice now because now it's 6-3, right? And even his vote only makes it 5-4.
Right.
So that concerns me in Pennsylvania, but the concern would only be if it were very tight and those votes made a difference. Legally, I think we have the much better argument, but as we know from Bush versus Gore, whether you have the best argument or not is not always the test. Now, the second state, Georgia, where it's just getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and there's a possibility of Biden margin, they already started a suit about Savannah, where Trump claims that there were 50-plus vote-by-mail ballots that only count if you arrive by 7 p.m. on Election Day, and they claim they saw somebody put them in the wrong pile and that they got counted, and the Elections Board says, I don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. This is their strategy. You throw out everything you can throw out.
Right.
They rarely come up with the evidence. It's like the whole time they were litigating before the election, and they talked about this myth of voter fraud, and every judge, conservative or liberal, said, okay, show me the evidence. They never came up with it because that's what they do.
Uh-huh.
They bluff. And so they're going to make a challenge in Georgia if Biden wins and start saying there were these kind of irregularities. They're going to have to show the evidence, obviously.
All right, so let me ask you this real quick, because this whole idea of voter fraud, I don't understand how President Trump can keep saying this, because based on the stories that I'm reading over the past few years, there was some fraud, but the fraud was done by Republican and right-wing leaning people. That's the only
like in North Carolina, where the congressman, was the fraud, and then he lost the election when and they found him out.
Right.
Every study, from the Conservative Heritage Foundation to MIT to the Brennan Center, 100% of the studies show that voter fraud is so infinitesimal and small that it never makes differences in elections, certainly not national elections. It's, I think one study, that was the Heritage. If you took the number of fraud cases for the vote-by-mail ballots over a 20-year period, it would average out one case per state every 7 years. Come on, this is insane.
Yes. We have been talking to attorney Richard Bell. He has a new book, and it is called Voting, the Ultimate Act of Resistance. So you were in Pennsylvania. You were in Pennsylvania Tuesday.
Oh, yes, I was. I was there for about 6 in the morning till after 8 at night outside the polling place. I was an outside poll observer to make sure things went smoothly. Uh-huh. I was actually in Montgomery County, which is adjacent to Philadelphia, and my polling place was about, at least for the people that showed up, were about, I would say, 90 to 95% African Americans. And it was great in terms of going smoothly. The lines did start out at about 2 hours in the morning, but I go up and down the line, speak to people, try to help them. Nobody got out of line. Nobody.
And so what were you anticipating? I mean, you've been doing this and being a poll observer for so long. What were you hoping would not happen, and it didn't?
Okay, sure. So after almost 2 decades, it was the first time I seriously thought about the potential of people carrying guns and trying to intimidate people, because in the training sessions we were all made very aware of that. Pennsylvania is an open carry state, mm-hmm. and we all had to be very vigilant as to what was going on. And voter intimidation, which is not the main issue when I do this kind of work, it's really more subtle suppression that takes place. But
like
this
what?
time we're very concerned. like denying voters the right to have a provisional ballot if there's some kind of discrepancy, or like I had in Florida, where the polling place would say to someone, no, you changed the address, you got to go back to the old place. Well, that's just not Florida law. You could sign an affidavit and go there. And they say, no, you got to drive 3 hours to where you used to live. That's subtle, but obviously it stops people from voting.
Right. And so moving forward, what are your greatest fears now?
Okay, you mean in terms this election?
Yeah, this election.
Yeah, this election. So here you go. What is the Trump legal strategy? Just strip it all down to something real simple. Here's the strategy. Let's stop the count. Okay, we weren't able to do that when we went to court. Let's delay the count. Well, that hasn't happened either so far. Well, next they're going to try to delay the certification of the count, meaning that all these numbers we get are not official in the sense that they have to be certified by each state, and that usually takes weeks. Sometimes it's early December, depends on the state.
Okay.
So their next goal will be trying to go to court and delay the certification, because this is what happened in Florida in 2000.
Right.
If they could do that, then they could get to a point where this December 8th date, which the Supreme Court talked about in Bush versus Gore,
right,
the safe harbor date that the electoral college voters in the state have to vote. If they could get it past that or up to that, then they could say, well, you know what? The numbers we have now, he'd have to be leading, of course, in the state. Well, the numbers we have now, those are the numbers. We can't do anything more for you. Let those be the electors. That's if you were leading the state.
Okay.
So that's what the strategy was basically in Bush versus Gore, and it worked. Unfortunately, we never had the full count. But here, it's all about delay, smoke, and mirrors. But I have to be very upfront with your audience. We don't have a friendly Supreme Court here.
Right, right. And the one thing that I think saves us is because is it law that every legal ballot has to be counted?
Yes, that is the law in every state, despite what the president tells us. But look, he's told over 5,000 lies, right? So this is just adding to it.
Right.
So yes, the answer is in every state, every vote must be counted. And what that means is obviously every viable vote, meaning you met the deadlines and you met whatever the requirements are of the state. But they have to be counted. And that's why it takes weeks to certify the count, because they check and recheck just to make sure errors weren't made.
So do you think that this president would delay so that he doesn't have to leave office January 20th?
Well, I'll tell you, I think if he does that and the Electoral College has met and he lost the election, I think he will be escorted out by federal marshals. I don't worry about that so much. My biggest concern is that it becomes so close. Because, look, he could challenge Pennsylvania, but if we won Nevada and Arizona, or Georgia and Nevada, and Wisconsin and Michigan, we win in the recounts, which we've won already in the regular votes, then we don't have to worry. Then Pennsylvania becomes moot, so it's not a problem. But, we're still at that stage that we don't have it yet. Right. So what worries me is what's going to happen in terms of this litigation, most of which I think is nonsense, but it's not what I think. It's what eventually
what the courts say.
The Supreme Court. Yes, exactly.
Well, listen, Attorney Richard Bell, as always, it is such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge of these elections and what to do and not to do at the polls. And we did everything possible to really educate our WVON audience, and they were calling in and telling us things that were going on. And it was a very exciting Tuesday, but we're still walking on eggshells, and we're
still walking on eggshells. And Perri, as I was told by the voters in line at my polling place, that the turnout at that polling place, and I said it was about 95% African Americans, they said it was longer lines than Obama in 2008. So the African American community, I hope America understands who they have to thank if Biden wins this election, and not forget it this time, and start doing what needs to be done in this country, because it's the only reason that Biden will win.
Thank you so much for saying that, Attorney Richard Bell. I appreciate you so much.